Welcome to Unlock Financial Independence, the #1 financial independence podcast for physical therapists. I am your host, Matt McClanahan. All right, welcome back, my financially savvy physios. I am your host, Matt McClanahan, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Unlock FI, where I help physical therapists just like you unlock your path to financial freedom while working as a physical therapist. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And for the new and old listeners alike, make sure you join and engage in the Facebook group, Financial Independence for Physical Therapists. And lastly, subscribe to the once per month newsletter, which will be linked in the show notes for monthly tips on things like travel hacking, state of student loans, listener wins, and more. On today's show, we're talking about how to make a budget. So if you are listening to this, you likely either have a budget and you're looking to make sure that it is set up correctly, or you don't have a budget and you're wanting to get going on one because you either have recognized how important it is, or you just know that you want to get a clear picture of what your finances are looking like. So why is a budget important for physical therapists on the path to financial independence? So understanding your finances is, in my opinion, a basic life skill. You would, if you started a business, you didn't have a general idea of where the money was going, you would probably not be that successful, or you might fall through it and get lucky, right? Maybe that's why a lot of businesses fail. Is because some people just aren't familiar with their finances. Same thing's true with your individual self. If you don't have a general idea of money coming in and money coming out of your own personal business, you're missing a key life skill, in my opinion. So why else is a budget important? It puts you in a position to have FU money, or quit when you want money, or go down to part-time when you want money. FU can stand for a lot of different things, right? Fuck you money, like fuck you, this job sucks, I'm done money. Financially, insert U word money, I don't know, right? But having a budget allows you to save enough money to know where your money is going, so that you can have enough of that cushion to where you can save up for FU money, right? And it's not impossible, but it can be challenging to get to that point if you aren't using a budget. And another good reason to have a budget is it does provide clarity on where you're at in the process to financial independence, right? So if you're early on, just graduated PT school in May, and you are about to get your first job, and then you are starting to have all this money come in that you didn't once before, right? Knowing where that money is going in your day-to-day spending or weekly or monthly spending is going to provide clarity and hopefully actually some peace for what you're doing to get you on this path to financial independence. Okay, so a budget is very important for physical therapists. Honestly, when you're working an outpatient job, or a job that is kind of the quote average medium income for a physical therapist, so not you home health people that are kind of listening to this, that are making a lot of money, but when we're making this kind of quote average PT income, especially if we have debt, I think which majority of us do, right? Very few of us get out of PT school without any debt. It is of utmost importance to have a budget, to know where your money is going, because more likely than not, it's going to feel like, especially early on, right, when you graduate and start making money, it's going to feel like you're kind of scraping by. And it's not a good feeling, right? Living paycheck to paycheck as a physical therapist, someone with a doctoral degree, we shouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck. We should have an emergency fund. We should be building these buffers, and it's totally doable if you have a budget, right? There's other factors to consider there, like lifestyle creep, like I'm not a student anymore, I'm a doctor, I can afford this brand new car, I want to live in this luxury, I don't know, apartment or whatever it may be, right? Once you graduate, you don't want that lifestyle creep to enhance. You want to start enjoying things a little bit more. You do make a little bit more money, but you want to know where that money is being put towards and your values with that. Okay. So budgeting, super important for physical therapists, especially as you just graduate PT school. All right. So what do you use to track a budget? Some people like the very old fashioned envelope method, where you literally have different envelopes and you use cash, right? I would say 99.9% of the people that are going to be listening to this podcast are not interested in that at all. Neither am I. There is a digital envelope system, where you will create these buckets all digitally and you can see where your money is at. And it's actually what I personally use. It's called youneedabudget.com, I believe. But in short, people call it YNAB, YNAB. You need a budget. So YNAB is the method that I utilize in order to track my budget. It is the best system in my opinion, at least for my brain and how I kind of operate. There are obviously others, such as just the good old fashioned Excel method. There's plenty of financial independence people out there who make Excel budgeting templates. You can find a million and one of them online somewhere. Feel free to download one of those. Better than nothing. There's Mint. I think they were purchased by somebody recently. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I utilized that very early on, talking during PT school. And what I found personally for myself was that it became more of a tracker. So it was reactionary, meaning I would just spend, do whatever I wanted, and then go look at it at the end of the week and be like, oh, okay, I'm over budget, right? So it didn't work out for me. Doesn't mean it won't work out for you, but Mint's another one. And then there are plenty of others, right? I think Dave Ramsey has one out there, and there's probably a million and one other ones. That being said, I like YNAB. I think it works best for me. And in the future, I do plan on creating a video on how to create a budget in YNAB and how to get started on that specifically for physical therapists. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. Shoot me a message on Instagram. I think that, hearing that somebody's interested in that video drives me to want to get started on that sooner than later. So if you're interested in how to create that budget in YNAB, you're interested in it, please let me know and I'll get on that sooner than later. Okay. All right. So now for the meat and potatoes of this conversation. What makes a budget, right? So from a 30,000 foot view perspective, you can kind of think of four broad categories. Okay. You have your fixed expenses, you have variable expenses, something that we'll call miscellaneous expenses, and then investments and savings, right? So fixed expenses, variable expenses, miscellaneous expenses, investments and savings. Okay. Now let's go under each of those and start talking about what kind of goes under each of those. Okay. So fixed expenses. This is pretty straightforward, right? This is going to be something that every single month it's going to be the same, and it's going to come out at a certain date every month, right? So what does that look like? Rent, utilities like your water bill and things like that usually come around the same time. They can change a little bit from month to month, but you can dedicate a certain amount towards it every month, right? Student loans are mostly going to come out at the same time. I know that's like a debt, but same time every single month. Any insurance, car insurance, health insurance, things like that. Your internet, Netflix, Apple TV, any of your streaming services, your gym memberships, any online food prep things that come out every single month, right? These are fixed expenses. They are fixed. They come out at the same time every single month. They're the same cost, relatively the same cost every single month, right? That is your bare bones must pay expense, right? Okay, cool. Moving on. Variable expenses. So I personally like to call variable expenses living expenses. And the reason for that is I include my groceries as a part of that. My car, for the gas for my car, I include in that. My dog's like food, and then potential vet bills in the future and grooming. Like, though, these are all, in my opinion, variable expenses are what I like to have as my living expenses because I will be spending them on my life. But in the event that something goes on where I have to really tighten my budget up, I can potentially cut down on my groceries. I can cut down on maybe how much gas I'm using. Maybe I think I over budget for that a little bit. I can cut down on how much money I'm trying to save for my pet's monthly expenses. I even have like clothing and household items under there, and then even my like cosmetics, right? Like shampoo, conditioner, all that type of stuff. That's just me personally. You can make your grocery budget include your shampoo. You can make it you can have your household items under your grocery budget if you want. Like, it doesn't matter. Just know that these are all variable expenses and they can change. I like to break it out personally right now with where I'm at in my budgeting life, let's say, and I'll get more into that a little bit later. But for right now, just know variable expenses are also kind of living expenses. Okay. Miscellaneous expenses. These are kind of like they catch everything else in it, right? So they can be broken down into different categories too. So I think miscellaneous expense is like the top of the umbrella. And then we're going to have a couple different categories underneath those, right? So things like your long-term expenses, maybe even like fun spending, right? Or gifts or charity donations, things like that, right? So, for example, miscellaneous expense is the main category, and then I'm going to have long-term expenses underneath that. Under my long-term expenses, you can put things such as your APTA membership, right? We know it comes out yearly. And then when it hits the bank account, we get all pissed off because it's 400 something dollars or whatever it is. And that's less money in our pocket. But that could be something that you're putting a little bit of money towards each month. And then it's not a $400 expense. It's just another extra 25 bucks, right? Because you fund that extra 25 bucks. You're at fully funded on your APTA membership, right? So I get it. They're too high. Like they're so high, and it makes you wonder, what are they doing for us? But I do think it's important to be a member of the APTA so that they can continue to push initiatives forward that hopefully increase our reimbursement, right? So I'll get off my high horse on that one. But if you are an APTA member or you want to be one, you can start funding an APTA budget under your long-term expenses, right? The other thing that, quote, sneaks up on people every single year is your state license, right? I think actually every 2 years, right? It's good for 2 years, but then it comes around again and we get surprised about that, right? Some of you might use your employer to fund that. Others might not have that option. So it might be something that you include in your long-term expenses. Your car usually has to get renewed every single year for state fees. That's usually roughly about the same, maybe like 125 bucks, depends on the state you're in, right? That's another long-term expense. Some examples in my own personal life, I use a password manager. It's like 100 something bucks a year. YNAB, maybe it's like 100 bucks a year. Credit card yearly fees if you're travel hacking and you've got a couple cards that are like $99 fees per year. Those are coming out at a certain time every single year. And for some reason, I still purchase the Microsoft Office suite, right? So I have Microsoft Word and Excel and all that stuff. So all these are long-term expenses and expected fees that I'm going to incur. And I want to make sure that I'm budgeting for them a little bit every month so that they're not big surprises. Okay. You should too. When you start a budget, those things are going to surprise you for maybe the next year, right? You can sit down and think about all the different expenses that are going to be occurring. Chances are you're going to miss one or two of them, right? And that's okay. That is totally okay. The goal is that you're finding what those one-off payments are per year and trying to get them added to your budget so that in year two, when you go into finish year one of budgeting, going into year two of budgeting, you have 99, if not 100% of all the expenses that you're expecting to have for that year for long-term expenses, right? I've already kind of mentioned this healthcare, car maintenance. If you drive quite a bit, if you are doing home health PT or doing travel therapy, or you're doing maybe local but home visit therapy, you might have more car maintenance fees than other people. So maybe that's a category you include. You may be getting your oil changed 4 times a year because you're putting so many miles on it, right? So something to think about. Car maintenance, definitely want to include that category, but the amount that you want to put in there is going to be different person to person, right? And then on top of that, the last thing that I could think of with this category is con ed fees, right? We're going to have to get our state license renewed every 2 years. Some people's work is going to help them with those con ed fees, right? And if they do, fantastic. You may not even feel need to save for this. But if they don't, you might want to start putting a continuing education budget in your financial budget, right? All right. So I also, like I said, in under miscellaneous expenses, I include fun spending, but I break that out into even two smaller categories, like date night or eating out budget, and then I also put just like personal spending. I allocate myself a set amount each month where no questions asked, I can spend it on whatever the hell I want, right? So that's another item there. Gifts, it's in my opinion good to have a gift budget in there. If you have weddings coming up, you're probably going to be giving people a certain amount. If it's just you, you may save a little less. If it's you and your significant other, you may want to up that gift budget, right? And if you know you got 3 weddings coming up in fall, you may want to up the ante on that. So gift budgets, probably a good idea to have, and just put a little bit away every single month for that. Okay. And then last category that I mentioned was your investments and savings. Okay. Different headlines, different subcategories of your investments and savings are going to be your emergency fund or an income replacement fund. Those could be one and the same. And I've actually been changing how I think about those things recently. With our profession, we don't most of the time get fired on the spot, and then we're kind of left out to dry and have to figure out how we're going to make ends meet, right? Most of the time, you can see the writing on the wall if you are going to get fired, or you make the move yourself to kind of leave the company, right? So some people recommend like a 3-month income replacement fund, where if you just get fired or want to quit, you have a 3-month cushion to find a new job, go all in on your entrepreneur journey, whatever it may be. Now, people also recommend like an emergency fund, where in an event of an emergency, not a job related emergency, but say your car gets hit and you got to pay the $1,000 premium in order to get all the everything fixed, right? That's what an emergency fund would do. Now, I've recently changed my kind of mind on this, where it's like, well, both are kind of emergencies. They're just different emergencies. So why not just save for 4, 5, or 6 months worth of emergency replacement funds, right? And just chalk it all up as the same. That being said, maybe more of a conversation for another time. Just know that you should probably have some buffer of cash that's easily accessible, that is part of your investments or savings. Okay. Holiday spending. Everyone gets surprised when Christmas gets here or whatever you celebrate gets here. And you're like, oh my God, my paycheck is going to be lean because now I got to use all this money to buy gifts. But it's like, last I checked, December is the holiday season. End of November into December is the holiday season. Been that way since I can remember. So let's start putting money away each month so that that's not a huge expense for us when those months get here, right? Trips and vacations. I personally like to have a little bit of a different budget for this. So when I go on a vacation here soon, whenever I spend, it's going to come out of that fund versus my own personal spending fund, right? I like to just keep those a little bit separate for myself. And it gives me a little bit of a mental win. Like, when I see that click, click, click upward, it makes me feel like I can enjoy my vacation a little bit more. If you have a significant other, your anniversary is usually around the same time every year, I would assume. And then your birthday dinners or events that you might do, they're at the same time every year, right? So you can put those categories in there and start saving for it, right? And then bachelor and bachelorette parties. If you are a new grad PT student in your maybe mid 20s, more likely than not, for the next like 5 years, 5 to 10 years potentially, you're going to have a lot of friends getting married, wanting you to go on your bachelorette parties, and you're going to maybe feel tight, like you can't go on those. And so if you just put a little bit away each month for that, then you can, or at least have a category to where your intent is you can put a little bit away for that. You might be able to say yes to something that you originally didn't think you'd be able to say yes to, right? All right. So 4 broad categories to review that: fixed expenses, variable expenses, which I call living expenses, miscellaneous expenses, and investments and savings. Okay. Now, how do you decide how granular you need to be with your budget, right? So we have these 4 categories, and are those 4 categories enough where you can just say, I'm going to allocate 50% of my paycheck towards this category, 20% towards this one, 20% towards this one, and 10% towards this one? Maybe for some people, for sure, right? Whereas you heard me when I'm going through my budget there, I have subcategories and I try to add a little bit towards different things here and there. And for some of you, you might be like, Matt, you're splitting hairs, dude. It's way too complicated. And that's okay. Like, if that doesn't work for you, that is totally fine. Budgets are very individual, and you got to find out what works best for you. Okay. But one thing that I want to say is, if you're being told what to do with like your budget, you're never going to learn to do the budgeting yourself. So I don't want to sit here and tell you guys, you need to put this amount percent towards this towards this towards this. Although there may be some optimized ways, given your scenario, that you should be putting things towards it. But for a catch-all episode like this, there's no specific percent that I want to throw out here that you have to stick to. Okay. Kind of goes back to the give a person a fish versus teach a person to fish. If I teach you to fish, you'll be able to build your own budget yourself. But if I give you give you a fish, essentially, you're just going to make a cookie cutter approach. It might not be sustainable long term. So same thing, same principle with like with exercise, right? If you're being told what to do with your workouts and not knowing how to modify or anything like that, then when the time comes, if you get an injury or anything like that, you're going to be like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm just not going to work out. But if you're being told what to do with your workouts, but you know how to change, then change the workout based on how you're feeling for that day. Man, that's so much more flexible. That makes a budget more flexible, right? So you got to learn the fundamentals. And once you know the fundamentals and you've created the budget, then you can start to simplify, in my opinion. Okay. The other thing to think about here is, if you just get out of PT school, you don't have any cash savings, you don't have any like investments or things like that, it may feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck versus the clinician who may have like 6 months in an emergency fund and they have like 50,000 invested. Those people might take a different approach. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you might have to know exactly how much money is being allocated towards these different single categories, because quite honestly, you're going to be trying to get ahead as quick as possible. Because honestly, what happens to a lot of people is, if they don't have that emergency fund and then some event occurs and happens to them, like I said it before, someone hits their car, then you have to get that money from somewhere, and then you put it on a credit card, and then you keep going. You're trying to save, pay off this credit card, and something else happens, right? So these scenarios, these doom and gloom scenarios where you're just going more in debt, can occur. So, and it's going to feel like you might live paycheck to paycheck as a new grad PT. But what you're trying to avoid is those doom and gloom scenarios. So you might want to, quote, pinch pennies or know where every dollar is going early on, so that you can build that buffer And then as that buffer is built, where say back to the scenario, someone hits your car and you got to pay 1,000, it's like okay, I mean, not that it's not a big deal, but it's not taking a huge hit to your budget. You pay your $1,000 and then you keep moving on with your budget and you slowly build that back up. That $1,000 that was taken out, you slowly build that back up. Those different scenarios, you might have to tighten up early on when you're paycheck to paycheck, and then you can loosen your budget up to where it fits your lifestyle better as you have that buffer. Okay. So how do you decide to put how much money to put towards each category? Well, so you've bought into YNAB. You say, Matt, I'm a YNAB person. I have created my different categories. Now I need to know how much money to put towards those categories. Like I said, I can't make that decision for you, but a good way to start is to figure out how much money you're already putting towards those categories. Okay. So fixed expenses are going to stay the same every single month, right? What I would personally do, figure out what each paycheck is going to be, then total per month, right? So let's say you make 4,000 per month, and you then decide. Then you go and look at your fixed expenses, and you can take out how much money comes away from the fixed expenses, and then that gives you how much percentage of fixed expenses is towards your monthly. So let's say, for easy math, let's say that you make 4,000 a month, and then you calculate your fixed expenses, and it's 2,000 a month. You know that 50% of your take-home pay is going towards your fixed expenses, right? Simple math there. Then what you can decide, you can retroactively or you could just spend on what you normally would for groceries, what you normally would for gas, all those different living expenses that I talked about earlier for 1 month. And then you can get an idea of, okay, how much do I spend on my living expenses in a month's time? And then the same thing, you can calculate the percentage that you spend towards the living expenses per month, right? And then the miscellaneous expenses, these are kind of like you should try to budget towards them, but like you might not be able to exactly. And so with miscellaneous expenses, if you've calculated all those out, you can already decide what that percentage is going to be too. So for example, APTA membership, let's say it comes out a year from today and it's $450 per year. You know that $450 divided by 12 equals whatever it is per month. I can't do the math right now. And then that's how much you're going to have to budget per month, so that in 1 year from today, you're going to be able to pay your APTA fees, right? You go through each different category under those miscellaneous expenses, right? And then you'll get an idea of what your monthly target is, or monthly allocation that you have to spend towards or have to put towards those miscellaneous expenses. So let's say you go through all those and it's like $500, right? So then you're essentially saying that about, I think if my math's correct, 12.5% will be going towards miscellaneous expenses per month. So that's how you would get your miscellaneous expenses. You know, some things are going to pop up along the way where you're not going to know. You didn't remember to add something in that comes out once a year, right? There's an app you purchased that's yearly subscription and you forgot about it. Came out, it was $59.99, whatever it was, right? Just roll with the punches. Those will come out and you can add those later. We're just trying to get a general idea here, right? So fixed expenses, you have an idea of what's coming out each month. Your living expenses, you're going to try to just spend what you typically would in 1 month. And then in a month's time, you can get an idea of what you average out in each of those categories. Your miscellaneous expenses, if we have a good idea of all the categories, we can get an idea of how much money we're going to put towards those each, or how much we typically put towards those each month, right? And then that leaves our savings and investments category, where these are more optional, right? Like vacations and spending and Christmas and all that. You're going to have to decide what those percentages are for yourself. Now, after you have all those categories, all those kind of like different goals, let's say, for your budget, then you're going to have a kind of a clear picture, right? Because 4,000, if you make 4,000 a month, that doesn't change. And then if you make your budget and you're realizing that, oh shit, all these categories that I just made, it adds up to $4,500 a month. So now we got to make some changes, right? Fixed expenses can't really change. Our living expenses might be able to have some flexibility there. Our miscellaneous expenses, well, maybe we were gonna save and give to charity, or maybe we were gonna save for $50 a month for gifts, whatever it may be, right? You can start to see where you might be able to trim some of the fat. And then maybe even in your savings and investments, maybe you're not willing to compromise on retirement saving, but maybe it's unrealistic to save $1,000 for Christmas gifts, and maybe like 750 is the better option, right? Doesn't matter. I'm making numbers up here, right? But you have to basically know what you bring in per month, create your categories so you have an idea of what you will be spending or your goals to save and invest and spend per month, and then see how those compare, right? And once you get those to match up, money coming in equals money coming out. I think that's the correct analogy. Then you're going to have an idea of your currently allocated funds and your target allocated funds, right? So what I mean by that is, say your fixed expenses are 50%, like in that previous example, $2,000 of your 4,000 you make goes towards your fixed expenses, right? Well, maybe you want that to be more like 40%. Well, your current allocated percentage funds is at 50, but your target is 40. And so you may be able to see if you can whittle some of those things down and get it a little bit lower. And you can just play around with this. So you can say, well, today I'm at 40 fixed, or excuse me, 50 fixed. I'm at 20 living expenses, 20 miscellaneous, and 10 investment. But I want to have 20 investment. So if I want 20 investment, 10% has to come off somewhere else. So maybe I want to decrease down to 45 with my fixed expenses, and maybe instead of 20% towards living expenses, maybe I go down to 15%, right? And so then you can kind of start moving things around on how you want to save your current allocated percentages towards those big categories and your target allocated percentage towards each of those categories. Okay. Like I said, this is very individual, so individual that I'm trying to keep it as broad as possible and not give like, this is what you need to do. But if you want to work longer, you may save a little bit slower and enjoy your life a little bit more right now. Or if you want to save so aggressively and live very conservatively, you may be able to get to that retire early portion, right? And you can think of this on a sliding scale. If you have one side where you save only enough where you can retire at, let's say, 65, just because that's when Medicare kicks in, right? Then you may not save as much per month, and you may spend more now, right? Just to have an inflated lifestyle and enjoy today. On the very other end of that spectrum, it might be someone who is literally not doing anything with their life other than going to work and saving and trying to just live as conservatively as possible, right? And honestly, probably either spectrum might be a little wrong. The somewhere in between here is what's best. And that's going to be individual to you on what you think is best for you. I know where I kind of fall on this spectrum here of what I want to be able to do. And sometimes what you want to be able to do and what you're able to do financially might not align. And maybe that's where you have to decide, is this job worth it? And should I go into something that pays a little higher for a little while? Those are all very, very, very individualistic. Okay. And I don't have that answer for you, but it's something to definitely think about. Okay. So next steps, you have your budget. You've created your budget. Now what do you do? Okay. Daily, I would say that you should add your transactions so that you know what you're kind of spending on with each of those receipts that you get or whatever it may be. Weekly, you're going to be cross-checking your accounts in that system with your banking account. So like with YNAB, I make sure that everything that's in YNAB is agreeable with what's in my different bank accounts. The stuff that I spend on, not like I'm not going into my retirement accounts and things like that every single week. That's just unnecessary. Um, and then monthly, you're allocating to the next month so that you're trying to get that month ahead. And you're going to reconcile these accounts to make sure that everything lines up. And then everything's dialed down to zero at the end of each month. Quarterly, maybe you're going to reassess your spending goals and your percentages, your current allocated percentage and your target allocated percentage. And then you're going to maybe adjust your budget as needed. And then yearly, you're going to definitely adjust your budget if it's not fitting your current lifestyle to fit maybe your averages from the previous year. Or you're going to just get a real zoomed out picture of like, okay, well, when did we spend the most in X category or Y category, whatever it may be. Okay. So in sum, to recap what a budget is, 4 huge broad categories: fixed expenses, living expenses, miscellaneous expenses, and investments and savings. Under those, you're going to have different maybe subcategories, and that can get very granular depending on where you're at in the process. Or you can keep it 30,000 foot if you have a lot more cushion in money, so to speak. Okay. Then what you're going to do once you have your budget, you're going to want to potentially look at it daily to know, or add transactions daily, do certain things weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. And these things might not take a lot of time at all. And once you have that, it's just an efficient machine month over month. And the greatest thing you can do is track your net worth over time. And don't get obsessed about it, but know that if you're doing all the things right and it's your budget is set up to fit your lifestyle, that you're going to get those results that you want with your investments, with your savings, and living the life day in and day out that you desire. Okay. So like I said, YNAB is my preferred method for tracking my budget. If you are wanting to see how I would set up that budget in YNAB, I will definitely do that video. Please message me on Instagram to let me know if you're interested in that. But that's all I got for you guys today. Create that budget, see what you can do, see what method you like best: YNAB, Mint, Excel, whatever works best for you. Just get on a budget today and get started. Okay. Don't forget to subscribe to the monthly Financially Savvy Physio newsletter, where I send out travel rewards hacks, financial information specific to physical therapists. Follow me on Instagram and YouTube at UnlockFI Rehab on all platforms, and join the Financial Independence for Physical Therapists Facebook group to join other physios just like you on their path to financial independence. Until next time, y'all, peace.